The call came at 9 a.m. on a Tuesday. I was standing in the office kitchen, stirring honey into my second cup of Earl Grey, when my phone lit up with my sister's name. Melanie never calls before noon. Ever. Something in my chest tightened as I answered. She's gone, Erin. Her voice was flat, empty. Mom passed about 20 minutes ago. I remember setting my mug down with this strange, deliberate care. Like if I could just place it perfectly on the counter, everything else would somehow fall into place too. I'm with her now, Melanie continued. The hospice nurse said it was peaceful. She just stopped breathing. I didn't cry, didn't speak, just stood there watching the steam rise from my tea, thinking about how Mom would never again remind me that proper British tea needs milk, not honey. That annoying, endearing thing she always said. Erin, are you there? Yeah, I'm here. My voice sounded wrong. Far away. I'll book a flight. Today. I'll be there tonight. The kitchenette door swung open, and in walked Lloyd Palmer, VP of Business Development and the closest thing I had to a mentor at Archer Thompson Financial. I turned away, pressing the phone closer. Take care of everything there, I told Melanie. I'm coming home. Lloyd was watching me, eyebrows raised, as I hung up. I must have looked like hell because his usual smirk softened slightly. Everything okay? I opened my mouth to tell him, this man who'd championed me through 2 promotions, who'd told me I reminded him of his daughter, and my phone buzzed again. A text from Daniel Hargrove, CEO and founder. My actual boss. My office. Now, Lloyd glanced at my phone. Better not keep him waiting. He's been on a tear since the Tokyo numbers came in. I left my tea steaming on the counter. It would be cold by the time I returned. Cold like my mother's body, which was lying in a hospice bed 1,800 miles away while her oldest daughter walked into the dragon's lair. Before I get into what happened next, I should probably introduce myself. I'm Erin Caldwell, 32, Senior Investment Strategist at at Archer Thompson. For 8 years, I built financial models that helped millionaires become billionaires while my student loan payments ate half my monthly income. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'm the girl who graduated top of her class and still had to bring coffee to meetings for 6 months before anyone bothered learning my name. The one who worked Christmas Eve while my colleagues were with their families because you don't have kids, so what's the big deal? The woman who wore the same 3 professional outfits in rotation because looking too feminine meant not being taken seriously, but looking too masculine meant being labeled difficult. And I was the daughter who moved across the country from her dying mother because a job opportunity was too good to pass up. The daughter who promised to visit every month but averaged every 3 instead. The daughter who said, there'll be time later, until suddenly, there wasn't. If you're still with me, maybe hit subscribe. I don't know if I'll ever make another video after this one, but I guess we'll see. Anyway, Daniel Hargrove's office occupied the northeast corner of the 47th floor. Floor-to-ceiling windows, modern art that probably cost more than my parents' house, and a desk large enough to land a small aircraft. He didn't look up when I entered, just kept scrolling through his phone. The Huang team from Singapore lands at noon, he said, still not looking at me. Conrad is bringing them straight here from the airport. I stood there, my mind struggling to shift from, my mother is dead, to Singapore client arriving. The Huang deal? I finally managed. That's scheduled for Thursday. Daniel looked up then, his steel gray eyes narrowing. Their CEO had a scheduling conflict. They moved it up. Conrad called me last night. Conrad, the account manager who consistently took credit for my work, who had my number but hadn't bothered to let me know about this massive change. I need to book a flight, I heard myself saying. My mother just died. I have to go home today. There was a moment, just a flicker, where something like sympathy crossed Daniel's face. Then it was gone, replaced by the expression I'd seen countless times in board meetings. Calculation. That's unfortunate timing, he said, setting his phone down. But the Huang specifically requested the strategist who built the acquisition model. That's you. My mother just died, I repeated, louder this time, as if volume would make it penetrate. He leaned back in his chair. Erin, I understand this is difficult, but we're talking about a 3 million commission. This is the deal that puts us in the Asia market. You've worked on this for months. I can present remotely. Or Conrad can. The Huangs are old school. They don't trust what they can't see face to face. He sighed, adopting what I now recognize as his practiced, compassionate leader voice. Take tomorrow off. Once we sign the deal today, you can have bereavement leave, but miss this meeting and there won't be a job to come back to. I stood there, feeling something crack inside me. Not just break crack, like a foundation with too much pressure bearing down. 8 years of pressure. 8 years of just this one more thing, Aaron, and the team needs you, Aaron, and no one understands these models like you do, Aaron. My mother is dead, I said for the third time. And I'm sorry for your loss, Daniel replied, already looking back at his phone. But the Singapore client lands in 2 hours. Make your choice. Have you ever had that moment where your body seems to know what to do before your brain catches up? I walked out of Daniel's office, past my desk with its sad little plant that I watered faithfully every Monday, past Lloyd, who called something after me that I didn't hear, and into the main conference room. It was empty except for Zoe from marketing, setting up her presentation materials for the Singapore meeting. Hey, she said, glancing up. You look like you've seen a ghost. My mom died this morning, I told her. The first time I'd said it aloud to someone who wasn't family or Daniel. Zoe's hands froze mid-motion. Oh my God, Aaron. I'm so sorry. Daniel said if I missed the Huang meeting to go to her funeral, I'm fired. Her eyes widened, mascara framed, and suddenly angry on my behalf. That's illegal. That has to be illegal. Maybe it was. I didn't know. What I did know was that in the high-stakes world of financial services, people disappeared all the time for crossing the wrong person. Not fired officially, just gradually sidelined until they got the message and left. I need your laptop, I said, the plan forming as I spoke, and I need you to go to my desk and get the blue thumb drive in my top drawer. What are you going to do? Zoe asked, already unplugging her MacBook. I looked around the conference room at the polished table where I'd sat through hundreds of meetings, at the pristine whiteboard where I'd drawn financial projections that made men like Daniel millions while I scraped by in my studio apartment. I'm going to do both, I said. I'm going to bury my mother and close this deal. Zoe handed me her laptop. Whatever you're planning, I'm in. And that's when I told her exactly what I needed. The next 2 hours were a blur of purposeful activity. I pulled up the Huang acquisition model, my masterpiece of financial engineering that I'd spent 6 months building. I knew every variable, every formula, every assumption. I'd stress-tested it against market crashes, political upheaval, and currency fluctuations. What Daniel didn't know, what nobody knew, was that I'd built a shadow version. A version where the numbers still worked, still showed the same beautiful returns, but with one crucial difference. It protected the Taiwanese manufacturing workers that the Huangs were planning to replace with automation. My mother had been a union organizer for 30 years, the daughter of Taiwanese immigrants who'd worked in factories their whole lives. She'd raised me on stories of exploitation, of people treated like machinery to be upgraded or discarded. The numbers on the page are always people, Aaron. She'd told me when I got my first finance job. Never forget that. I had forgotten. Or at least I'd gotten good at pretending I had. I called Melanie back. I can't get a flight until tonight, I told her, fingers flying over the keyboard. Start planning the service for Friday. I'll handle Mom's favorite flowers. White peonies, Melanie said automatically. And the Navy hymn. Eternal Father, strong to save, I confirmed. It had been playing when Mom met Dad at a USO dance in 1983. I'll be there tonight. I promise. Next, I called Conrad, who was escorting the Huang team from the airport. Hey, slight change of plan, I said, injecting casual authority into my voice. Daniel wants us to use the Holden Conference Center for the meeting. More impressive for the clients. Can you bring them there instead? Since when? Conrad asked suspiciously. Since the building management just informed us they're testing the fire suppression system in our conference room today. You want to explain deal points while we're all getting sprayed with water? He didn't question it further. At 11:45, I walked into Daniel's office without knocking. He was straightening his tie in the reflection of his phone. "I've moved the meeting to the Holden Center," I told him. "Building maintenance issue." He frowned. "Why wasn't I informed?" "I'm informing you now. Cars waiting downstairs. I've already sent Zoe ahead to set up." For a moment, I thought he might question it, but Daniel Hargrove had a pathological fear of appearing uninformed. He nodded like this had been the plan all along, and grabbed his suit jacket. As we rode the elevator down, I looked at this man who'd just forced me to choose between my mother's funeral and my career, and I felt nothing. The anger would come later. In that moment, there was just clarity. We stepped outside into the October sunshine. I pointed to the black town car idling at the curb. "That's our ride," I said. "I just need to grab something from my car. Meet you there in 30 seconds. Daniel nodded, heading toward the town car while checking his phone messages. I watched him get in, watched the car pull away from the curb, and I whispered the 7 words that changed everything. "He's not going to the right meeting." Then I turned, walked to the parking garage, got in my own car, and drove to the airport, leaving Daniel Hargrove headed to an empty conference room across town, while the 3 million Singapore clients arrived at our office building, where Zoe was waiting to greet them and usher them into a presentation that would change everything. But that was just the beginning of what I had planned. I want to be clear about something. I'm not one of those people who plans elaborate revenge fantasies. At least, I never thought I was. What was happening wasn't even about revenge yet. It was about survival, about refusing an impossible choice. As I merged onto the highway toward JFK, I called Zoe. "They're here," she said without preamble. "All 7 of them. The Huangs, their legal team, their financial advisors. And Conrad?" Calling Daniel every 30 seconds, getting more panicked each time. Daniel's phone is going straight to voicemail. That's because Daniel's phone was in airplane mode. I'd reached over and toggled the switch while pointing out something on the contract during the car ride. A small thing. Something he wouldn't notice for at least an hour in the confusion. "Give them the good coffee," I instructed. "The Ethiopian beans we hide from marketing. And put them in the East Conference Room, the one with the view of the bridge." "Already done." Zoe paused. "What about your presentation?" I glanced at the clock on my dashboard. "Starting in exactly 26 minutes. Have you set up the video link?" "Yes, but Aaron, are you sure about this?" "No. I wasn't sure about anything except that my mother was dead, and I wasn't going to miss saying goodbye because a man in an expensive suit thought his money was more important than my grief." "Just make sure everyone's in their seats at 12:30 sharp," I said. "And Zoe? Thank you." The airport terminal was a blur of bodies and noise. I found a family bathroom, one of those single-occupancy rooms, locked myself in, and pulled out my laptop. Using my phone as a hotspot, I logged into the secure video conferencing platform we used for client meetings. 12:28 p.m. I freshened my makeup with shaking hands, smoothed my hair, and straightened my blouse. There, in a bathroom stall at JFK, I prepared to give the most important presentation of my career. At exactly 12:30, I clicked, "Join meeting." The screen filled with faces around our conference table. The Huang family patriarch, Winston Huang, sat at the center, flanked by his son and daughter. Their advisors lined the sides. Zoe sat at the far end, giving me a subtle thumbs up out of view of the others. "Good afternoon from New York," I began, my voice steadier than I felt. "I'm Aaron Caldwell, Senior Investment Strategist for Archer Thompson Financial. I apologize for the virtual presentation. I've been called away for a family emergency." Winston Huang frowned slightly. At 78, he was old school in every sense, famously preferring face-to-face meetings. "However," I continued, "I believe what I'm about to show you will be worth the unconventional format." For the next 45 minutes, I walked them through my alternative acquisition model. Not the one that had been approved by Daniel, the one that protected the Taiwanese workers while still delivering the 18% return the Huangs wanted. I showed them how automation wasn't necessary for profitability, how keeping the experienced workforce would actually reduce quality control issues that plagued new automated systems. This approach gives you something more valuable than a marginal increase in short-term profits, I told them. It gives you stability, institutional knowledge, and, most importantly, it gives you face. Winston Huang's eyebrows rose slightly at my use of the Chinese concept. The current labor protests in Taiwan have international attention, I continued. By retaining the workforce, you position yourselves as responsible corporate leaders rather than opportunistic cost cutters. The goodwill alone will open doors throughout the region that might otherwise remain closed. I took a breath, aware I was about to cross a line I couldn't uncross. My mother passed away this morning, I said, my voice finally betraying a tremor. She was the daughter of Taiwanese factory workers who came to America for a better life. She spent her career fighting for worker protections, and as I prepared this presentation for you, I kept asking myself what she would think of my work. The conference room was utterly silent. I could see Winston Huang studying me through the screen. Mr. Huang, I believe this alternative approach honors my mother's legacy while still meeting your financial objectives. It's not just good ethics, it's good business. There was a long moment of silence. Then Winston Huang leaned forward. Where is Mr. Hargrove? He asked. Unavoidably detained, I replied smoothly, but I'm authorized to negotiate the final terms. This was, of course, a complete lie. Winston exchanged looks with his son, then his daughter. Some unspoken family communication passed between them. Ms. Caldwell, he said finally, my condolences on your loss. My own mother worked in a textile factory for 40 years. Her hands were never without calluses. He paused. We will proceed with your model. I felt a rush of something, not quite victory, not quite vindication, something more complicated. Thank you, Mr. Huang. Zoe will provide the contracts reflecting these terms. As I prepared to sign off, Winston Huang added, and Ms. Caldwell, go bury your mother with honor. Business can wait. I ended the call, closed the laptop, and finally allowed myself to cry. My flight was boarding by the time Daniel figured out what had happened. My phone exploded with notifications, first texts, then voicemails, each more apoplectic than the last. Where the hell are you? The clients are here. Not at Holden. Call me immediately. And finally, you're fired. Don't bother coming back. I turned off my phone as I settled into my seat. 6 hours to fly across the country. 6 hours to process what I'd just done. I'd blown up my career. 8 years at the company, gone. My reputation in the industry, possibly unsalvageable. The mortgage on my apartment that I could barely afford, even with my senior strategist's salary. What would happen to that now? But I'd also done something else. I'd honored my mother in the only way I knew how. I'd used my financial models, the skills she'd always regarded with a mixture of pride and suspicion, to protect people like her parents, like the people she'd spent her life advocating for. Somewhere over Ohio, I realized I was smiling. The next 3 days passed in the surreal fog of grief and funeral arrangements. Melanie and I sorted through Mom's modest belongings in her assisted living apartment. We argued about the eulogy, cried over her collection of refrigerator magnets from places she'd visited, and drank cheap wine directly from the bottle like we used to in college. She kept everything you ever sent her. Melanie told me, pointing to a shoebox filled with postcards and trinkets from my business trips, even the stupid stress ball from that conference in Dallas. The guilt crashed over me, all the visits I'd canceled, the calls I'd cut short because of work emergencies. The last time I'd seen Mom, 2 months earlier, when I'd spent half the visit on email because of a critical client situation. She was proud of you, Melanie said, reading my thoughts the way only siblings can. She didn't always understand what you did, but she was proud. The funeral was on Friday, just as we'd planned. White peonies everywhere. Eternal Father, Strong to Save, played by Mom's friend from church who'd been a professional pianist in her younger days. I delivered the eulogy without breaking down, which would have disappointed Mom, who always said a good cry was cleansing for the soul. I didn't check my work email once. I didn't return Daniel's calls. I existed fully in the moment of saying goodbye to the woman who had taught me that principles matter more than profit. It wasn't until Saturday, the day after the funeral, that I finally opened my laptop and logged into my work account, expecting to find it deactivated. Instead, I found an email from Lena Huang, Winston Huang's daughter and chief operating officer of Huang Enterprises. It had been sent 4 hours after my bathroom stall presentation. Ms. Caldwell, the contracts have been signed using your revised model. My father was impressed by both your financial acumen and your ethical stance. We value partners who understand that longevity in business requires more than quarterly profits. We were disturbed to learn from your colleague Zoe that you presented this model without Mr. Hargrove's approval, and that you have potentially sacrificed your position to honor your mother while still serving our interests. Should you find yourself seeking new opportunities after your bereavement, Huang Enterprises would welcome a conversation. With respect and condolences, Lena Huang. There was a second email, this one from Lloyd Palmer, sent just yesterday. Aaron, the board emergency meeting just concluded. I don't know what the hell you did, but the Huangs not only signed, they increased their initial investment by 30% based on your model. They also made it clear they would only work with you going forward. Daniel is, well, apoplectic doesn't begin to cover it, but the board is ecstatic about breaking into the Asian market. No one's going to fire the person who just landed the biggest client in company history. Take the time you need for your family. Your job will be here when you return, though things may look a bit different. Daniel's position is under review. I'm sorry about your mother. Lloyd. I read both emails twice, then closed my laptop and walked outside to the porch swing where Mom used to sit in the evenings. The California sunset painted the sky in colors she would have appreciated. My phone buzzed with a text from Zoe. Company all-hands meeting announced for Monday. Rumor mill says Daniel's out, restructuring coming. You're the hero of the 38th floor. When are you coming back? I didn't answer immediately. Instead, I thought about what coming back would mean. Back to a company that had forced me to choose between basic human decency and my livelihood. Back to a culture that saw family emergencies as inconvenient scheduling conflicts. I thought about Lena Huang's email, about possibilities I hadn't considered before, about my mother, who taught me that sometimes you have to blow things up to build something better. I did go back, but only for one day, just long enough to clean out my desk, download my contact list, and attend the all-hands meeting where Lloyd announced that Daniel had decided to pursue other opportunities, corporate speak for, was forced to resign in disgrace. Lloyd also announced my promotion to Vice President of Strategic Development, a position created specifically for me. I declined it publicly, in front of the entire company. I appreciate the recognition, I said, standing at the front of the room filled with shocked faces. But recent events have made me reevaluate what I want from my career and my life. I've accepted a position elsewhere. The room erupted in whispers. Lloyd looked like I'd slapped him. With the Huangs? He asked, microphone still on. No, I said. I'm starting my own firm. Ethical investment strategies for the new economy. I paused, looking around at the faces of colleagues who had been my whole world for 8 years. My mother taught me that the numbers on the page are always people. I forgot that for a while. I won't forget it again. 2 weeks later, Caldwell Strategic Advisors opened its doors, funded in part by investment from Huang Enterprises, in part by my own savings, and in part by the surprisingly generous severance package Archer Thompson provided when they realized I was taking the Huangs with me. My first hire was Zoe. My second was my sister Melanie, who left her marketing job to handle our operations. My third was Lloyd Palmer, who resigned from Archer Thompson after 30 years when he realized which way the wind was blowing. It's been 18 months now. We're small but growing. We specialize in acquisition models that prioritize worker retention and ethical supply chains while still delivering competitive returns. We have a waiting list of clients. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if Daniel hadn't given me that impossible choice on the worst morning of my life. If he'd shown a shred of basic human compassion, he probably would have kept his job. I probably would have kept mine. The Huangs would have gotten their original model. Hundreds of Taiwanese workers would have lost their livelihoods, and I would have continued being a small cog in a soulless machine. Sometimes the worst moments of our lives become turning points we never could have anticipated. So that's my story. Not exactly the revenge saga you might have expected from the title, I guess. I didn't destroy Daniel out of spite. I just chose not to sacrifice myself or my values for his profit margin. The fact that he imploded as a result was just karma doing its thing. My mom would say it was justice, that the universe has a way of balancing the scales. I keep her picture on my desk now, right next to the stress ball from that conference in Dallas. Sometimes when I'm building financial models late at night, I swear I can hear her reminding me, the numbers on the page are always people, Aaron. I don't forget anymore. If you've stuck with me through this whole story, thank you. Maybe hit like or subscribe if you want to hear more. Though honestly, I don't know if I'll make another video. This was more therapy than content creation. But if there's one thing I hope you take away from my experience, it's this. When someone forces you to make an impossible choice, sometimes the best option is to reject their terms entirely and create your own path. It's terrifying. It's risky. But on the other side might be something better than you ever imagined. And if you're dealing with grief and impossible choices of your own right now, I see you. It gets, well, not easier exactly, but different, more manageable. The waves don't stop coming, but you learn to swim. Anyway, thanks for listening to my 2 a.m. confessional. I should probably try to sleep now. I walked into the office after my 3-day regional meeting feeling lighter than I had in months. The quarterly numbers were excellent. Our project deadlines had all been met, and I'd even managed to secure additional budget for team training. The moment I stepped off the elevator, something felt wrong. The usual Monday morning buzz was missing from our department floor. The East Wing corridor where my team of 7 brilliant engineers worked was eerily quiet. Finola? I called out, looking for our lead developer who was always first to arrive. No answer. Our workspace, the one we'd earned after delivering 3 consecutive breakthrough projects, stood empty. Desks cleared, monitors gone. Even the potted plants we'd nurtured were missing. Only rectangular dust outlines remained where our equipment had been. I spotted Loxley from accounting walking past. Hey, what happened to my team? Oh, his expression shifted to something resembling pity. You should check the basement. They moved them yesterday. The basement? We didn't even have office space in the basement. The elevator ride down felt eternal. Each floor passing by heightened my dread. When the doors opened, I had to navigate through storage areas and maintenance rooms before finding a door with a hastily printed sign, Engineering Team B. I pushed it open to find my team huddled between exposed pipes and utility boxes. Their monitors balanced precariously on folding tables. Extension cords snaked across the concrete floor. Water dripped from a ceiling pipe, landing with rhythmic plunks into a bucket near Finola's makeshift desk. What happened? I asked, though their downcast faces told me everything. Finola looked up, her eyes burning with humiliation. While you were gone, Dieter came down with movers. Said we needed to relocate immediately to make room for the new specialist. We had 30 minutes to pack everything. A specialist? What specialist? Some productivity expert, Ren, our youngest developer, added. Dieter says he's going to revolutionize the whole department. I climbed back upstairs to our former workspace. MRA, bright, airy, strategically positioned between the testing lab and design team. Now it housed a single person, a young man arranging framed certificates on what used to be my desk, while Dieter, our department head of 5 months, hovered nearby with an expression of unbridled admiration. Ah, there you are, Dieter exclaimed when he spotted me. Meet Bastian, our new productivity transformation specialist. His revolutionary approach increased output 300% at his last 3 companies. He needs proper space to implement his vision. He lowered his voice. Your team can manage downstairs until next quarter's budget review. I stared at Bastian, who didn't even pause arranging his awards to acknowledge me. I nodded silently and returned to the basement where my team waited, the distant hum of industrial machinery vibrating through the walls. The Wi-Fi signal barely reached. The nearest bathroom was a single toilet behind a shower curtain. The air smelled of mildew and defeat. 32 years with this company, muttered Vega, our hardware specialist, and this is how they treat us. I surveyed their dejected faces, people who had given everything to this company, who had pulled countless all-nighters to meet impossible deadlines, now stuffed in a basement like unwanted furniture. Then I smiled calmly. "Pack your bags," I said. "Not just for down here. Everything." They stared, confused but trusting. I held their gaze, my smile never wavering. "Trust me. Just start quietly gathering everything you might want to take with you someday, and keep this conversation between us." If you're enjoying this story so far, please tap that like button and subscribe for more workplace revenge stories that will leave you breathless. I'd love to hear in the comments if you've ever been undervalued at work. My name is Thea Moretti, and until that basement moment, I'd been the loyal, dependable leader of Engineering Team B for 8 years. Before joining the company, I'd spent 15 years coordinating refugee camp logistics during humanitarian crises across 3 continents. The company had hired me for my technical knowledge, unaware that I'd spent those years building global industry relationships while setting up supply chains in impossible conditions. I wasn't just good at solving technical problems, I excelled at solving human ones. When I transitioned to corporate life, I brought those skills with me. I could spot talent in unlikely places and build cohesion among wildly different personalities. Each member of my team had been handpicked not just for their technical brilliance, but for their ability to solve problems under extreme pressure. Finola, our lead developer, had been rejected by 3 other companies because of her unfiltered communication style before I recognized her genius with complex systems. Ren, fresh out of college but with natural talent for finding elegant solutions, had been passed over for higher-profile graduates. Vega had been ready to retire when I convinced him his hardware expertise was irreplaceable. Then there was Dax, our quietest member who spoke 5 programming languages but struggled with human ones. Kyrie, whose testing protocols had become industry standard. Indra, whose security systems were impenetrable. And Noor, who could translate technical requirements into language anyone could understand. For 8 years, we delivered consistently excellent results without fanfare. We weren't the flashiest team, but executives knew we were the ones to call when they needed something impossible done reliably. 6 months earlier, our longtime department head retired, and Dieter arrived with grand ambitions but zero understanding of our work. From day one, he'd been hunting for a game changer to impress executives, ignoring our consistent results in favor of flashy innovations. His golden hire, Bastian, had dazzled him with buzzword-filled presentations and promises of revolutionary methods. What Dieter never investigated was why someone with such transformative skills changed jobs 3 times in 2 years. For 2 weeks after the basement relocation, we worked from our exile. The conditions were abysmal. The temperature fluctuated wildly. The lighting gave everyone headaches, and twice we had to cover equipment during overhead pipe leaks. Yet my team followed my quiet instructions: archive projects, organize knowledge bases, create transition guides, while continuing their assigned tasks without complaint. "I don't understand why we're documenting everything so meticulously," Dax whispered one afternoon. "It's not like they appreciate our work anyway. Everything we do should be done with integrity." I replied, loud enough for everyone to hear. "No matter where we do it." The others exchanged glances but kept working. They trusted me, even if they didn't understand. Then came a surprising call from Yvain, the CEO, requesting I present our team's accomplishments at the upcoming board meeting. My team's spirits lifted. Finally, recognition. The morning of the presentation, I dressed in my best outfit and carefully reviewed my slides in the basement's dim light. As I climbed the stairs to the executive floor, Dieter intercepted me in the stairwell. "Change of plans," he smirked, blocking my path. "The board wants to hear about future innovations, not past performance. Bastian will present instead." But Yvain specifically requested. "I spoke with her this morning. She agrees my approach makes more sense." His smile didn't reach his eyes. "The board needs to hear about where we're going, not where we've been. You can go back to your workspace." My team deflated when I returned with the news. Our youngest member, Ren, glanced at her half-written resignation letter visible on her screen. "So this is it? We're just giving up?" "Not yet," I replied, my voice steady. "Keep packing quietly." Later that day, word spread through the company grapevine that Bastian's presentation had bombed spectacularly. Board members had asked technical questions he couldn't answer, exposing his shallow understanding of our core business. Dieter attempted damage control by promising our team would implement the concepts, despite their reluctance to embrace change. That afternoon, Dieter visited our basement, suddenly friendly. "Good news. We're considering moving you back upstairs, to the East Wing." The East Wing, slightly better than the basement, but still a clear demotion from our original space. The message was clear. We were still less valuable than the golden hire. "Thank you for recognizing our value," I said, surprising my confused team who expected outright rejection. Hope flickered again. That evening, Ren admitted she'd torn up her resignation letter. "If we're moving back upstairs, maybe things will improve." I merely nodded, saying nothing to confirm or deny her optimism. 2 days later, I invited an old colleague to tour our facility. As we walked through departments, I deliberately timed our arrival at the executive floor for when I knew Dieter would be showing Bastian around to potential clients. "Thea," Dieter called out, too loudly, too friendly. "Perfect timing. Come meet Grayscale Solutions executive team. They're interested in Bastian's productivity system." I approached with my visitor in tow. "This is my colleague, Talia." Dieter eagerly introduced Talia to Bastian, who launched into his rehearsed transformation speech. "Fascinating approach," Talia said when he finished. "You've used this successfully elsewhere?" "Absolutely. My methods boosted efficiency dramatically at my previous companies. Northwest Technologies saw a 300% productivity increase in just 1 quarter. "Strange," she replied, her voice cool and measured. "I sit on the board of Northwest Technologies. We never recorded such improvements. In fact, we noted significant project delays during your tenure there." The conference room went silent. Bastian's confident smile faltered. "There must be some confusion," Dieter began, his face flushing. "No confusion," I interjected. "Talia's here because I accepted her job offer yesterday. I'm bringing my team to establish a new engineering division at her company. We start next Monday." The Grayscale executives shifted uncomfortably. Bastian's confident smile vanished completely. "You can't take your team," Dieter sputtered. That's poaching. It's unethical." "But completely legal," I finished for him. "Check our contracts. No non-compete clauses. You relocated us to a basement with leaking pipes while focusing resources on unproven methods. Talia is offering us double our current salaries and proper working conditions. The board will never." "The board approved it yesterday," Talia added, "after reviewing your division's performance metrics against industry standards." Dieter's face cycled through shock, anger, and fear in rapid succession. The Grayscale executives began gathering their things, making excuses to leave. "Wait," Dieter's voice cracked slightly. "The East Wing renovation starts tomorrow. I'll match their salary offers." I looked at him with the same calm smile I'd worn since finding my team in the basement. "Too late," I said. The executives from Grayscale filed out, followed by Talia, who said she'd wait for me in the lobby. When only Dieter, Bastian, and I remained in the room, Dieter turned on me. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" he hissed. "I've secured my team's future," I replied. "Something you failed to do." "You've destroyed mine," he said, his voice breaking. The board was already questioning Bastian's hiring. "If your entire team leaves, you chose him over us," I said simply. "Actions have consequences." As I turned to leave, Dieter grabbed my arm. "Please, I made a mistake. I see that now. What will it take for you to stay?" I looked at his hand until he released me. "You know what's interesting about my refugee camp work?" I said quietly. "I learned that true character reveals itself not when things are going well, but in how people treat others when resources are scarce. You showed us exactly who you are when you put us in that basement." I walked out, leaving Dieter standing there with his golden hire, the sound of my footsteps echoing in the empty conference room. What I didn't tell him was that my plan had been in motion long before the basement incident, and that what he'd just witnessed was only the beginning. Back in the basement, my team waited anxiously. When I returned, their expressions ranged from hopeful to terrified. "Well?" Finola asked, unable to contain herself any longer. I closed the door behind me and surveyed the room. checking for any potential listening devices, a habit from my humanitarian crisis days. It's done. Talia offered us all positions, double our current salaries, proper equipment, and a real office with windows. The silence that followed was deafening. Then Ren let out a whoop that echoed off the concrete walls. "Are you serious?" Vega asked, his weathered face struggling between disbelief and hope. "Completely," I confirmed. "Contracts are being drawn up as we speak. We start next Monday." The celebration that followed was as muted as it was emotional. Hugs exchanged, tears wiped away discreetly. These weren't just colleagues. They were people who had become family through late nights, impossible deadlines, and shared successes. "I knew you wouldn't leave us in this basement forever," Noor said, squeezing my hand. "But how did you pull this off so quickly?" I hesitated. It wasn't quick. I've been laying groundwork for months. Their faces registered confusion. "Months?" Indra asked. "But the basement thing just happened 2 weeks ago." I sat on the edge of a folding table. The basement was just the final straw. I saw where things were heading the day Dieter arrived and started talking about fresh perspectives while ignoring our track record. "So you've been planning our escape all this time?" Kiri asked. "Not exactly an escape," I corrected. "More like an insurance policy." I started documenting everything: our contributions, Dieter's dismissals, project successes he took credit for. I reached out to old contacts, including Talia, just to reconnect. When things started deteriorating, those connections became more important. Dax, always the most perceptive despite his social awkwardness, studied my face. "There's more to this than just finding us new jobs, isn't there?" The others turned to me expectantly. "Let's focus on the transition for now," I said carefully. "We have 1 week to wrap things up properly. No loose ends, no unfinished projects. We leave with our professional reputations intact." "What about Dieter?" Finola asked, a dangerous edge to her voice. "Does he know we're all leaving?" "He does," I confirmed, "and he's panicking." The board was already questioning Bastian's hiring and the resources allocated to him. Losing an entire specialized team in one stroke is going to raise serious concerns about Dieter's leadership. "Good," Vega muttered. 32 years, and he sticks me in a basement. "What's our strategy for the next week?" Indra asked, ever the pragmatist. "We work. Professionally, thoroughly, and without complaint," I said. "We document everything meticulously. We prepare transition guides for our replacements. We act with complete integrity." "Why?" Ren asked, her youth making her the most direct. "Why help them after how they treated us?" "Because this isn't about them," I explained. "It's about us, about who we are. And because the best revenge isn't what you do to others, it's what you build for yourself while they're not paying attention." The team exchanged glances, not fully understanding but trusting me nonetheless. "There's something else you should know," I added. "Talia isn't just offering us jobs. She's creating an entirely new division with us as the core team. We'll have autonomy to build something from the ground up." This revelation shifted the mood from cautious celebration to genuine excitement. Even Vega, who had been contemplating retirement before the basement incident, straightened with newfound energy. "What are we waiting for?" he asked. "Let's finish our work here so we can start our real work there." For the next 3 days, we operated with mechanical precision. Every line of code was commented, every process documented, every system mapped. We worked longer hours than necessary, our impending freedom fueling our productivity. On the 4th day, Dieter appeared in our basement, looking haggard. Dark circles shadowed his eyes, and his typically immaculate shirt was wrinkled. "Thea, can we talk privately?" he asked, his voice lacking its usual confidence. I glanced at my team, who pretended to be absorbed in their work while obviously straining to hear. "Anything you need to say can be said here. We don't have secrets." He shifted uncomfortably. "I've spoken with the executive team. They've authorized me to offer your entire team a 15% raise, effective immediately. We're also expediting the renovation of the East Wing. You could be back upstairs by next week." I noticed he didn't mention what would happen to Bastian. "That's very generous," I said, "but we've already signed contracts with Talia." "Contracts can be broken," he pressed. "I'm sure there are clauses. 1. There aren't, I interrupted. Talia's legal team made sure of that. Dieter's professional veneer cracked slightly. Please, Thea. I admit I made a mistake with the basement situation, but this is going to destroy my career. The board meeting is on Friday, and if I have to announce that our entire engineering team resigned, for a moment, I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. The basement wasn't a mistake, Dieter. It was a revelation. It showed us exactly how much you valued our contribution. I kept my voice level. You chose Bastian's empty promises over our proven results. Now you have to live with that choice. He left without another word, shoulders slumped in defeat. The moment the door closed, my team erupted in whispered exclamations. Did you see his face? Kyrie marveled. 15%, Dax murmured. That's substantially less than double. It's not about the money, Finola said sharply. It's about respect. I let them talk, turning back to my computer to hide my expression. What they didn't know, what I couldn't tell them yet, was that Dieter's desperation was exactly what I had been counting on. That evening, as we were preparing to leave, my phone rang. The caller ID showed Yvain, the CEO. I stepped into the hallway to take the call. Thea, she began without preamble. I just heard the news from Dieter. Is it true your entire team has resigned? Yes, I confirmed. We've accepted positions elsewhere. A long pause. I'd like to meet with you tomorrow morning. Just you, not your team. 9 o'clock in my office. I'll be there, I agreed, then hung up. When I returned to the basement, 7 pairs of eyes locked onto me. The CEO? Finola guessed. What did she want? A meeting tomorrow morning, I replied, keeping my tone neutral. Are they going to try to stop us from leaving? Ren asked, worry creasing her forehead. They can't, I assured her. Our contracts are solid. This is probably just an exit interview. But as I said it, I knew it was much more than that. Yvain wasn't the type to conduct exit interviews personally. Whatever she wanted would complicate my carefully constructed plan, for better or worse. I slept poorly that night, rehearsing scenarios in my head. By morning, I had prepared for every possibility except the one that actually occurred. Yvain's office occupied the corner of the top floor, with glass walls offering a panoramic view of the city. She sat behind a minimalist desk, reading glasses perched on her nose as she reviewed documents. When I entered, she removed her glasses and gestured to the chair across from her. Thea, she said, her tone unreadable. I appreciate you coming. Of course, I replied, taking the seat. She studied me for a moment. I've been reviewing your team's contributions over the past 5 years. Impressive work, consistently delivered with minimal resources. Thank you. My team is exceptional. Yes, she agreed, which makes me wonder why they're all leaving simultaneously. The basement relocation seems insufficient as an explanation. I maintained eye contact. It wasn't just the basement, it was what the basement represented. Explain. When Dieter moved us downstairs to make room for Bastian, he sent a clear message about our value to the company. The basement was just the physical manifestation of how he, and by extension, the company, viewed our worth. Yvain leaned back. And you think I share this view? With respect, I said carefully, you approved Bastian's hiring and the resources allocated to him, despite no proven track record. So yes, I assumed you endorsed Dieter's approach. To my surprise, she laughed, a short, sharp sound. Dieter convinced the board, not me. I was outvoted. And now I get to say, I told you so at tomorrow's meeting. Her expression sobered. But losing your team is too high a price for being right. She slid a folder across the desk. This is what I'm prepared to offer to keep your team here. Not under Dieter, reporting directly to me. I opened the folder and scanned the document inside. The terms were exceptional, better even than Talia's offer. Autonomy, resources, recognition, and compensation that reflected our true value. For the first time since this all began, I felt my resolve waver. This was everything we deserved, everything I had wanted for my team before Dieter arrived. Why now? I asked, closing the folder. Why not 6 months ago? Politics, she said simply. The board wanted to give Dieter a chance to implement his vision. I couldn't undermine him openly, but this situation changes things. You're using our resignation to consolidate power, I observed. She didn't deny it. Mutual benefit, Thea. You get what your team deserves. I get to restructure without internal warfare. I need to discuss this with my team, I said, taking the folder. Of course. But I need an answer by end of day. The board meets tomorrow. As I stood to leave, she added, there's something else you should know. Talia and I have history. This isn't the first time she's recruited from us after disagreements. The implication hung in the air. Was I being used as a pawn in some corporate chess game between Yvain and Talia? I returned to the basement, mind racing. My team looked up expectantly. What happened? Finola asked. I held up the folder. Yvain wants us to stay. New department. Reporting directly to her. Better terms than Talia's offer. The stunned silence was broken by Vega. She's trying to save face. Maybe, I acknowledged. Or maybe she's sincere. Either way, we need to discuss this. What followed was the most honest conversation we'd ever had as a team. Fears were voiced, hopes articulated, trust questioned. The basement's dim lighting seemed fitting for the shadows we were exploring in our professional lives. I don't trust them, Indra said firmly. They only value us now that we're leaving. But building something new here, with real support, Kiri countered. We wouldn't have to start over somewhere else. Ren looked torn. What about our word to Talia? We signed contracts. With exit clauses, I reminded her. Legally, we could accept Yvain's offer. Dax, who had been quiet throughout, finally spoke. This decision isn't about what's best for us professionally. It's about what we can live with personally. All eyes turned to me. What do you think, Thea? You've led us this far. I took a deep breath. This was the moment that would determine everything. Not just our careers, but the culmination of the plan I'd been crafting for months. The plan that had evolved from simple self-preservation to something much more complex. I think, I said slowly, that we should split up. Their faces registered shock. Not permanently, I clarified. Strategically, 4 of us accept Yvain's offer. 3 go with Talia as planned. We maintain our connections, share information, and protect ourselves from being vulnerable to any single employer again. The silence that followed was profound. Then Finola began to laugh. That's absolutely brilliant, she said. We become our own network. Neither company can take us for granted again. The tension broke as the team began discussing how this might work. Who would go where, how we'd coordinate, the potential advantages of having inside perspectives at 2 major companies. As they talked, I slipped away to make 2 phone calls. The first to Yvain, the second to Talia. Both conversations were challenging, but by their conclusion, I had secured what we needed. When I returned, the team had reached consensus on who would stay and who would go. I've spoken to both Yvain and Talia, I announced. They've agreed to our split approach with one condition: regular collaboration between the 2 teams on select projects. They're actually excited about the possibility. And which group will you lead? Noor asked the question everyone was thinking. I smiled. Neither. I'll be consulting for both teams, dividing my time, building bridges rather than choosing sides. The relief in the room was palpable. We'd found a solution that honored everyone's needs while creating something entirely new, a team that transcended organizational boundaries. As we celebrated our unconventional solution, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Board meeting moved up to tomorrow, 9 a.m. Dieter presenting restructuring plan. Bastian featured prominently. Thought you should know. A friend. I stared at the message, my mind rapidly recalculating. This changed everything and nothing. The final phase of my plan would need to happen sooner than expected, but the outcome might be even better than I'd hoped. Change of plans, I announced, interrupting the celebration. We need to prepare for tomorrow's board meeting. Why? Vega asked. We've made our decision. Because, I said, tomorrow isn't just about our future. It's about making sure everyone understands exactly why we're leaving and what they're losing. As I outlined what we needed to do, I saw understanding dawn on their faces. This wasn't just about finding better jobs or escaping a bad situation. This was about changing the system that had devalued us in the first place. By midnight, we had everything prepared. As we finally left the basement, possibly for the last time, Ren asked the question I'd been waiting for. Thea, how long have you really been planning this? All of this? I looked at my team, my brilliant, loyal team, who had trusted me through basement offices and uncertain futures. They deserved the truth, or at least part of it. Since the day Dieter introduced Bastian as the future of the department, I admitted. But what's happening tomorrow? That part I've been planning much longer. What exactly is happening tomorrow? Finola pressed. Justice, I replied simply. And I need you all to trust me one more time. As they nodded their agreement, I felt a surge of something powerful. Not just the satisfaction of a plan coming together, but the absolute certainty that what we were about to do was right. Not just for us, but for every overlooked team, every undervalued contributor, every person who had ever been relocated to a metaphorical basement to make room for someone flashier but less substantial. Tomorrow would change everything, and no one, not even my team, knew exactly how. Morning arrived with a pale light filtering through the basement's tiny windows. I arrived before anyone else, dressed in the charcoal suit I reserved for the most important client presentations. As my team arrived one by one, each looked surprised to see me already there, calmly preparing materials. Ready for today? Finola asked, setting down her bag. More than ready, I replied, handing her a sealed envelope. When the time comes, you'll know what to do with this. The others received similar envelopes, each with specific instructions. They tucked them away without questions, the ultimate demonstration of trust. At 8:30, we made our way to the executive floor. The boardroom doors remained closed. Executives and board members likely already inside discussing matters before the official meeting. My team and I waited in the adjacent room, an uncomfortable silence hanging between us. Shouldn't we be in there? Ren whispered, gesturing toward the boardroom. We weren't invited, I explained. But don't worry, we will be. At precisely 8:55, Yvain's assistant approached us. The CEO requests Engineering Team B join the meeting. My team exchanged nervous glances as we gathered our materials and followed her into the boardroom. The long mahogany table was surrounded by board members in expensive suits, with Yvain at the head. Dieter sat halfway down, papers spread before him, with Bastian beside him looking uncharacteristically subdued. Dieter's eyes widened when he saw us enter. He leaned over to whisper something to Bastian, whose complexion paled considerably. Thank you for joining us, Yvain said, gesturing to the empty chairs on the opposite side of the table. I've asked Thea and her team to provide context for some of the proposals we're discussing today. As we took our seats, I noticed a familiar face among the board members. Talia sat 3 seats down from Yvain, offering me a slight nod. Now, Dieter, Yvain continued, you were about to present your departmental restructuring plan? Dieter stood, straightening his tie nervously. Yes, as you know, our department is undergoing significant transformation to align with market demands. The centerpiece of this transformation is our new productivity methodology, pioneered by Bastian, which promises to revolutionize our workflow. He clicked through several slides showing colorful charts with impressive upward trends. Initial implementation has begun, and we project a 200% productivity increase by year-end. Impressive, one board member commented. And what about the existing engineering team? How are they adapting to these new methodologies? Dieter hesitated, glancing at us. There have been some resistance to change, as expected with any transformation. But we're addressing that through gradual implementation and appropriate resource allocation. Resource allocation, Yvain repeated. Could you elaborate on that, Dieter? He shifted uncomfortably. We've had to prioritize certain workspace considerations to maximize efficiency. Some temporary relocation was necessary. By temporary relocation, do you mean moving an entire specialized engineering team to the basement? Yvain asked, her voice deceptively mild. The board members stirred, several frowning as they looked between Dieter and our team. It was an interim solution, Dieter insisted. The renovation plans for proper workspace are already underway. I see, Yvain said. And these renovations began after you learned the team was resigning, correct? Dieter's face flushed. The timing was… Thea, Yvain interrupted, turning to me. Perhaps you could give the board your perspective? I stood, feeling the weight of every gaze in the room. Thank you, Yvain. Before I begin, I want to clarify that what I'm about to share isn't about personal grievances. It's about systematic issues that threaten this company's future. I turned to my team. Now, please. They each opened their envelopes and distributed documents to every person at the table. Dieter received his copy last, his hand trembling slightly as he took it. What you're looking at, I explained, is a comprehensive analysis of our department's productivity over the past 5 years, alongside financial allocations and resource distribution. The final pages show projected outcomes based on current management decisions. The board members flipped through the meticulously prepared documents, their expressions growing increasingly concerned. "These numbers can't be right," one board member said, pointing to a particular section. "This shows a projected 30% decline in deliverables under the new structure." "The numbers are accurate," I confirmed. "They're based on the department's own data, accessed through our project management systems. This indicates the team relocated to the basement was responsible for 78% of the department's successful deliverables last year." Another board member noted, looking up sharply. "Dieter, were you aware of this?" Before Dieter could respond, I continued. "What you may find most interesting is on page 12, the background check my team conducted on Bastian." Bastian jumped to his feet. "That's private information. You had no right. Every bit of information there is publicly available." I cut in calmly. "Including court records from the wrongful termination lawsuit at your previous company, and the class action settlement from the company before that." The room went silent as everyone turned to those pages. Bastian slowly sank back into his chair. "You'll note," I continued, "that Bastian's revolutionary methodology has been implemented at 3 companies. All 3 experienced initial enthusiasm followed by significant productivity declines. 2 of those companies no longer exist. The third laid off 40% of their workforce last quarter." Dieter's face had gone from red to ashen. "I wasn't aware." "No, you weren't," I agreed, "because you didn't do proper due diligence. You were so focused on finding a game changer that you ignored both warning signs and the consistent results your existing team was delivering." I turned to address the entire board. "This isn't just about my team being relocated to a basement. It's about a management approach that values flash over substance, that chases quick wins at the expense of sustainable growth. It's about decision-making that ignores data in favor of charisma." The silence that followed was profound. Even Yvain seemed taken aback by the thoroughness of our presentation. Finally, the board chair spoke. "Yvain mentioned your team has received offers elsewhere. Given what you've shown us, I'm not surprised. But I'm curious, why bring this to us now, when you're already leaving?" I smiled. "Because I care about this company, despite recent events, and because my team and I have proposed an alternative structure that would benefit everyone." I nodded to Noor, who distributed a second set of documents. "This proposal suggests splitting our team between continuing here and joining Talia's company, with collaborative projects between the 2. It provides stability during transition, maintains crucial institutional knowledge, and creates a partnership that could strengthen both companies." Talia spoke up for the first time. "I've reviewed this proposal and fully support it. This arrangement would be unprecedented in our industry, and potentially revolutionary." The board chair studied the proposal, then looked at Dieter. "And where do you fit in this new structure?" Before Dieter could respond, I answered, "That's for the board to decide. Our proposal requires new leadership for the remaining team, someone who values substance over style." The board chair nodded slowly, then turned to Dieter. "I think we need to continue this discussion privately. Thea, thank you for your candor. Would you and your team give us the room?" As we gathered our things to leave, Dieter finally found his voice. "This is a setup," he hissed. "You've been planning this for months." I met his gaze steadily. "No, Dieter. You set this up the moment you decided my team belonged in a basement. I simply made sure everyone understood the consequences of that decision." 3 hours later, my team and I sat in a local restaurant, celebrating with Talia as my phone buzzed with a message from Yvain. "Dieter and Bastian are gone. Board approved your proposal. When can you start as department director?" I showed the message to my team, whose cheers drew curious glances from other diners. I quickly typed my response. "Monday. Half-time, as agreed. other half with Talia's team. So that was your plan all along? Finola asked, her eyes wide with realization. Not just to leave, but to completely restructure both companies and take Dieter's position? Not exactly, I admitted. The original plan was simply to secure our team's future. But when I saw how deeply flawed the system was, I realized we had an opportunity to fix it, not just for us, but for everyone who might come after us. And splitting the team between companies? Vega asked. Insurance, I explained. No single employer will ever have complete leverage over us again. We'll always have options. Ren raised her glass. To basements, then. Without them, none of this would have happened. We all laughed and clinked glasses. As conversation flowed around me, I thought about how sometimes the best revenge isn't destroying your enemies, but building something better from the rubble of their mistakes. 6 months later, our unprecedented arrangement had become a case study in industry publications. The collaborative model between formerly competing companies had increased innovation while reducing burnout. Both companies' stock prices had risen significantly. As for Dieter and Bastian, last I heard, Dieter was working at a much smaller company in a reduced role. Bastian had reinvented himself as a workplace culture consultant, still chasing the next opportunity to sell empty promises. And my team? No longer in any basement. We occupied bright, airy offices in both companies. Our worth finally recognized not just in words but in actions. More importantly, we'd created a new model that valued substance over style, consistency over charisma, and respect over hierarchy. The most satisfying revenge isn't what you do to those who wronged you. It's creating a world where what they did to you becomes impossible for them to do to anyone else. If you've ever been undervalued at work or pushed aside for someone with a flashier approach, drop a comment below. I'd love to hear how you handled it. And if you enjoyed this story of workplace justice, hit that like button and subscribe for more tales of people who turned professional lemons into leadership lemonade. The blueprint they'd laid out was perfect. I stood there, my breathing shallow as I watched Madeline's perfectly manicured fingernail trace a circle around the fatal flaw in my presentation. The conference room lights seemed to brighten, highlighting every flaw in my skin, every nervous twitch in my hands. This design is quaint, she said, her voice dripping with manufactured concern. But our clients expect innovation, not whatever this is. The board members shifted uncomfortably. Mr. Finley, our CFO, cleared his throat as if to speak, but Madeline's raised eyebrow silenced him. She'd been at the company less than 8 months, yet somehow wielded this power. Rhiannon, Adeline chimed in, her voice falsely sweet as she adjusted her glasses. We've noticed a pattern in your work lately, a lack of vision. I stared at the presentation I'd spent 3 sleepless nights perfecting. The quarterly numbers were undeniable. My designs had increased sales by 32%, but looking at the faces around me, I realized numbers didn't matter anymore. Perhaps, said Madeline, sliding forward a folder I hadn't noticed before. It's time to consider whether your talents might be better utilized elsewhere. Inside was a separation agreement, predated from 2 weeks ago. They'd planned this ambush long before today's meeting. Before I'd even finished the presentation, they were now tearing apart. Verity wanted us to give you this opportunity to resign gracefully, said Griffin, the third member of their triumvirate, his fingers steepled as if in prayer. Given your history with her. My throat closed at the mention of Verity's name, my mentor, my champion. Now, undergoing her 3rd round of treatments, too weak to attend board meetings, too distant to see what was happening in the company she'd built from nothing. I'd like to speak with Verity directly, I managed, my voice embarrassingly thin. Madeline's smile tightened. She specifically asked not to be bothered with this, said it was too disappointing. That single word, disappointing, pierced deeper than anything else they could have said. The thought of disappointing Verity was unbearable. We need your decision today, Griffin added, sliding a pen toward me. For the sake of the company. I looked around the table, faces I'd worked alongside for years now, carefully avoiding my gaze. The security guard hovering by the door, apparently there to escort me out regardless of my decision. The humiliation burned through me like acid through metal. 5 years of my life, countless nights, designs that had transformed this small studio into a recognized name, all being erased in a 15-minute meeting. I signed the paper. "Your personal items have been packed," Adeline said, her voice bright as if this were a celebration. "No need to return to your workspace." As I stood to leave, Madeline placed a hand on my shoulder. "Creative fields can be so volatile. Perhaps something more stable would suit you better." I walked out with a cardboard box of belongings, their murmurs following me until the heavy glass doors closed behind me. On the sidewalk, I looked up at the elegant sign I'd helped design, Veracity Jewelry Design. 2 years later, I would walk through those same doors again, but everything would be different. Because what Madeline, Adeline, and Griffin didn't know as they orchestrated my humiliating exit was that they had just set in motion the beginning of their own downfall, and I would be the architect of it. Wait, before I continue with what happened after that terrible day, if you're enjoying this story, please hit the like button and subscribe for more revenge stories that will make your heart race. Drop a comment about what you would have done in my shoes. Would you have signed that paper? I'd love to hear your thoughts. My name is Rhiannon Wesley. I'm 34 years old with a master's degree in fine arts and a specialization in metalwork and gemology. Growing up, I was the quiet girl with calloused hands who'd rather spend lunch periods sketching designs than socializing. My mother was a nurse who worked double shifts. My father left when I was 4. We never had much, but we had enough. Jewelry design wasn't just a career choice for me. It was the language I spoke when words failed. Each piece I created told a story, carried an emotion, preserved a memory. In my hands, metal and stone became more than decorative objects. They became vessels of meaning. I met Verity Blackwood when I was 29, struggling to make rent by selling my designs at local markets while working as a barista. She bought a pair of my earrings, then returned the next weekend for a necklace. On her third visit, she didn't buy anything. Instead, she handed me her business card. "I've been watching how you talk about your work," she said. "You don't sell jewelry. You translate human experiences into wearable art. I need someone like you." Verity was 62 then, a legend in the industry who had built Veracity from her kitchen table 30 years earlier. Despite her success, she still had soil under her fingernails from her garden and wore jewelry that sometimes looked peculiar but always felt right against the skin. My first day at Veracity, she didn't put me in the design department. Instead, she sat me at a workbench beside her and handed me a misshapen lump of silver. "Make something honest," she said. I worked that silver for 8 hours, forming it into a pendant that resembled a seed breaking open. When I finished, my hands were trembling with exhaustion. Verity examined it, her eyes narrowing behind her glasses. Then she nodded once. "You understand the difference between decorating a body and honoring it. That's rare." Within 2 years, I became creative director. My designs helped transform Veracity from a respected local studio into a national name with waiting lists and features in prestigious magazines. Our pieces weren't the most expensive on the market, but they became known for how they moved with the body, how they caught light at unexpected angles, how they felt alive against the skin. Then Verity got sick. Pancreatic cancer. Stage 4 by the time they found it. "Keep designing," she told me from her hospital bed. "The company needs your voice." With Verity absent, the board brought in industry veterans to help maintain stability. Madeline Thorne, with her perfectly styled bobbin background at a famous auction house. Adeline Winters, with her academic credentials and connections to wealthy collectors. Griffin Peck, with his sales experience and charismatic presentations. They arrived with portfolios of impressive achievements and immediately began questioning everything about Veracity's approach. "The market is shifting," Madeline explained during her first week. "We need to adjust our positioning." At first, I tried to collaborate. I shared my design process, my insights about our clients, the philosophy Verity had built the company on. They nodded and took notes and smiled in ways that never reached their eyes. Then, strange things began happening. A custom wedding ring I designed for an important client developed a crack before the presentation. My sketchbook disappeared for 3 days, then reappeared with subtle alterations to key designs. Client meetings I was scheduled to lead were suddenly reassigned to Madeline or Griffin, who would return with feedback that contradicted everything the client had originally requested. They felt your design was too unconventional, Griffin would explain. Though when I checked with the clients later, they expressed confusion about why their requests had been changed. Premium sapphires I'd selected for a signature collection were swapped for lower quality stones that lacked the depth of color I'd specified. Budget considerations, Adeline explained, though our profit margins were higher than ever. During an important presentation to our biggest potential client, slides showcasing my most innovative designs were mysteriously corrupted, showing only blank screens. Technology, Madeline sighed, before smoothly transitioning to her own prepared materials. They were careful, always. Nothing could be directly traced back to sabotage. Nothing I could take to the board as evidence. Just a steady erosion of my work, my reputation, my confidence. When I tried to visit Verity in the hospital to tell her what was happening, I found Adeline already there. She's resting, Adeline said, blocking the doorway. The doctors say stress could worsen her condition. She specifically asked not to be troubled with work matters. I later learned from a nurse that Verity had been asking for me, but my messages were never delivered. The isolation was calculated and complete. Staff members I'd worked alongside for years began avoiding me, whispering when I entered rooms, questioning decisions I'd made 100 times before. "We're just concerned," Madeline would say during meetings, her voice gentle as she outlined another of my supposed failures. "We all want what's best for Verity's company." By the time they orchestrated my final humiliation in that board meeting, I was already a ghost in the company I'd helped build. The separation agreement wasn't just the end of my job. It was the culmination of months of carefully orchestrated psychological warfare. I left Veracity that day, believing I had failed Verity, believing I had never been good enough, believing the spark that had once made my design special had somehow burned out. For 6 months, I couldn't touch metal or sketch a design. I moved to a smaller apartment, took a job teaching basic metalwork at a community center, and tried to rebuild some semblance of a life. But something inside me had broken the day I walked out of Veracity. Then came the call that changed everything. "Ms. Wesley, this is Bartholomew Reed, attorney for Verity Blackwood. I'm afraid I have some difficult news." Verity had passed away. After months of fighting, the cancer had finally won. "She asked to see you many times near the end," Bartholomew said, his voice gentle. "Her care team said your visits were repeatedly blocked by colleagues claiming to be protecting her rest periods." The revelation hit me like a physical blow. She had wanted to see me. She hadn't been disappointed in me. "There's more," Bartholomew continued. "Ms. Blackwood made some significant changes to her will in her final weeks. She's requested your presence at the reading tomorrow morning." I arrived at Bartholomew's office, expecting nothing more than perhaps a small memento, a final goodbye from my mentor. What I didn't expect was to find Madeline, Adeline, and Griffin already seated in the conference room, their expressions a mixture of surprise and poorly concealed annoyance at my arrival. "What is she doing here?" Madeline asked, not bothering to hide her disdain. Bartholomew simply adjusted his glasses and began reading Verity's will. The room fell silent as the words washed over us. Verity had left me everything: the company, the property, the inventory, all assets and intellectual property rights. Veracity jewelry design, valued at over $3 million, was now entirely mine. "This can't be legal," Griffin sputtered, his face flushing red. "She wasn't in her right mind. We'll contest this." Bartholomew slid a video across the table. "Ms. Blackwood anticipated your reaction. She recorded this with 2 independent medical professionals certifying her mental competence." The video showed Verity, thin but clear-eyed, speaking directly to the camera. "Rhiannon, if you're watching this, I failed to protect you, and for that, I am deeply sorry. What happened at Veracity in my absence was not what I intended. These 3 individuals," she gestured to photographs of Madeline, Adeline, and Griffin, "were brought in against my better judgment by board members who believed their industry connections would benefit the company." She took a labored breath before continuing. "What they didn't understand is that Veracity was never about connections or trends. It was about honesty in design, about creating pieces that honor the wearer rather than simply decorating them. You understood that from the beginning. That's why I'm leaving everything to you, because you're the only one who truly knows what veracity means. The video ended, and the room remained silent for several long moments. This changes nothing, Adeline finally said, her voice tight. We have contracts, legal agreements that guarantee our positions. I looked to Bartholomew, who nodded encouragingly. Then, I guess I'll see you tomorrow, I said, standing up, at the company I now own. As I walked out, I heard Griffin's angry voice. She doesn't know what she's doing. She'll run it into the ground within a year. Perhaps they were right. Perhaps I didn't know what I was doing. But I knew one thing with absolute certainty. I would rather burn veracity to the ground than let them continue to desecrate what Verity had built. What I didn't yet know was exactly how I would reclaim not just the company, but the confidence they had so methodically destroyed. I had ownership on paper, but they had spent months embedding themselves into every aspect of the business. They had allies on staff, connections with clients, and a head start on manipulating the company's systems. As I stood outside Bartholomew's office, the weight of what lay ahead almost crushed me. How could I possibly outmaneuver 3 people who had made careers out of strategic deception? But then I remembered something Verity had told me on my first day. Metal remembers. Every time you hammer it, fold it, heat it, it keeps a record. Your job is to make those memories beautiful. Perhaps it was time to see what memories Veracity held about Madeline, Adeline, and Griffin. And perhaps it was time to hammer out something new from the material of my own pain. Tomorrow, I would walk back into Veracity. And this time, I wouldn't be leaving. The next morning, I arrived at Veracity 30 minutes before opening. The security guard did a double take as I approached the glass doors, hesitating before letting me in. The weight of the moment wasn't lost on me. Less than 7 months ago, a different guard had watched me leave with a box of personal items. My dignity in tatters. Ms. Wesley, he said, nodding respectfully as he held the door. Welcome back. The studio was quiet, morning light streaming through the tall windows. I stood in the reception area, allowing memories to wash over me, both good and painful. The display cases showcasing our most iconic pieces. The framed photo of Verity on opening day 30 years ago. The workbenches visible through the glass partition where artisans would soon be arriving. I walked slowly toward what had once been my design studio, noticing immediately how it had changed. My organized chaos had been replaced with sterile minimalism. The inspiration wall where I'd pinned sketches, material samples, and client notes was now bare except for a single framed magazine cover featuring Madeline accepting an industry award. A voice behind me made me jump. You're early. I turned to find Pierre, our master metalsmith who had worked with Verity for nearly 20 years. His eyes were cautious, but not unkind. I wanted a moment to reorient myself, I said. He nodded, studying my face. They told us you had a breakdown, that you couldn't handle the pressure anymore. The statement hung between us, neither accusation nor question. And what did you think, Pierre? His weathered hands traced the edge of a nearby workbench. I thought that in 30 years of metalwork, I've never seen pressure crack something that wasn't flawed to begin with. Before I could respond, the elevator chimed. The morning staff began arriving, some stopping in surprise at the sight of me, others hurrying past with averted eyes. Many were faces I recognized, though there were several I didn't. At precisely 8:30, the triumvirate arrived together, as though choreographed. They faltered only slightly upon seeing me standing in the center of the main floor. Madeline recovered first, her perfect smile sliding into place. Rhiannon, she said, approaching with open arms, as if we were old friends. What a lovely surprise. We didn't expect you so soon. I own a jewelry company now, I replied, stepping back from her attempted embrace. Seems like I should check in. Griffin laughed, too loudly. Of course. Though there's no need to disrupt your schedule, we have everything under control here. I'm sure you do, I said. That's why I've called an all-staff meeting in 30 minutes. Conference room A. Adeline's smile tightened. We actually have client presentations this morning. Perhaps we could schedule something for later this week? Give you time to adjust. The meeting stands, I said, turning to walk toward Verity's, now my, office. Oh, and I've invited Bartholomew Reed to join us. He has some interesting insights about the company's legal structure. I didn't wait for their response. Verity's office was largely untouched, a shrine rather than a functional workspace. Her glasses still sat on the desk. A half-finished cup of tea, long since evaporated, remained on the side table. Her garden shears lay beside a vase of dried flowers. They had preserved it perfectly, telling the staff it was out of respect. But I knew better. This room was their trophy, physical proof of their successful takeover. I sat in Verity's chair and began reviewing the files Bartholomew had sent over the previous night. Financial statements, client contracts, employee records, the legal framework of the company Verity had built and I now owned. When I entered conference room, 30 minutes later, every seat was filled. Staff members glanced nervously between me and the trio, who had positioned themselves at the opposite end of the table. Bartholomew sat quietly to my right, his leather portfolio closed before him. "Thank you all for coming," I began, my voice steadier than I felt. "For those who don't know me, I'm Rhiannon Wesley. I was creative director here until about 7 months ago. And now she's our new owner," Madeline interjected, her tone suggesting she was helping me along. A surprising development for us all. I nodded. Surprising indeed, especially given the circumstances of my departure. The room tensed. "But today isn't about the past," I continued. "It's about Veracity's future. Verity built this company on a philosophy that jewelry should honor the wearer, not just decorate them. That philosophy will continue to guide us going forward." Griffin cleared his throat. "While sentiment is valuable, Rhiannon, the market has evolved. Our current direction has increased quarterly profits by 17%. At what cost?" I asked, opening the folder before me. "Client retention has dropped by 38%. Custom commissions, once our hallmark, are down by over half. Social media engagement has plummeted. Initial growing pains," Adeline said dismissively. "The new clientele we're attracting spends more per purchase. They buy once and don't return," I countered. "That's not sustainable growth." Madeline's smile never wavered. "Perhaps this is a conversation best had in private. Staff meetings are typically for operational updates, not strategy discussions." "I disagree," I said. "Everyone in this room contributes to what makes Veracity special. They deserve to understand the company's direction." I turned to address the wider group. "Starting today, we're returning to our core values: quality over quantity, artistry over mass production, connection over transaction." The trio exchanged glances. Griffin leaned forward, his expression sympathetic but firm. "Rhiannon, before you make sweeping changes, there's something you should know." He slid 3 folders across the table. "These are our employment contracts, signed by the board during Verity's illness. We each hold the title of senior partner with protected decision-making authority." I opened the first folder, skimming the document inside. The terms were exactly as Griffin had indicated. Each of them had been granted substantial authority and protection from termination. "Interesting," I said, passing the folders to Bartholomew. "We're not trying to undermine you," Adeline added, her voice gentle. "We simply want to ensure a smooth transition. These agreements protect the company's stability." Bartholomew adjusted his glasses as he reviewed the documents. The room was silent, tension building with each passing second. "These appear to be in order," he finally said. Madeline's smile widened. "Wonderful. Now that's settled, perhaps we can—" "However," Bartholomew continued, "as legal counsel for Verity Blackwood, and now for Ms. Wesley, I should point out that these agreements, while binding, are subject to the company's articles of incorporation." He opened his portfolio and removed a document. Section 7, paragraph 3, states that, while senior partners may not be terminated without cause, the owner retains the right to reassign responsibilities and restructure departments as needed for the company's benefit. The trio's confident expressions faltered. "What exactly does that mean?" Griffin demanded. I leaned forward. "It means you can keep your titles and your salaries, but as of today, your responsibilities are changing." The next 2 hours were a masterclass in controlled chaos. I reassigned Madeline from client relations to inventory management, Adeline from marketing to quality control, Griffin from sales to production support. This is absurd, Madeline hissed as the meeting concluded. You can't possibly expect us to accept these positions. Your contracts guarantee your titles and compensation, not your specific roles, I replied. You're welcome to resign, of course. You think you're being clever, Griffin said, his voice low, but you have no idea what you're up against. Actually, I do, I said. I've spent 7 months thinking about nothing else. As the staff filed out, many lingered, wanting to speak but hesitant. Finally, Pierre approached. The Augusta Commission, he said quietly. They've been asking for you specifically. Refuse to work with anyone else. I felt a small flame of hope ignite. They're still interested? He nodded. There are others too. Clients who left when you did. Word travels fast in this industry. Over the next weeks, the battle lines were clearly drawn. The trio refused to resign, determined to wait me out. They performed their new duties with bare minimum effort while meeting secretly with board members, suppliers, and key clients. I worked 18-hour days, reconnecting with former clients, rebuilding relationships with artisans, and most importantly, designing again. My fingers remembered what my mind had tried to forget, the way metal yields to persistent pressure, the way stones reveal their true character under proper light. 1 month after my return, I unveiled a new collection, 7 pieces inspired by resilience and renewal. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Orders flooded in, press coverage exploded, former clients returned, bringing new ones with them. Through it all, Madeline, Adeline, and Griffin watched and waited, their smiles growing more strained with each success. I knew they were plotting something. Their whispered conversations stopped when I approached. Their sudden business trips coincided with meetings of our most important suppliers. They're trying to turn the board against you, Bartholomew warned during one of our weekly meetings, suggesting your changes are too radical, too risky. Let them try, I said, showing him the latest sales figures. The breaking point came 3 months after my return. I arrived early, as had become my habit, to find my office door ajar. Inside, Griffin was at my computer, downloading files to an external drive. Gathering research? I asked from the doorway. He startled but quickly recovered. Just collecting some historical data the board requested. Nothing confidential. Of course, I said, making no move to stop him. Though next time, you might want to ask first. He left with the drive, and I made no attempt to prevent it. Instead, I called Bartholomew. It's happening, I said, just as we anticipated. The next day, Madeline requested a private meeting. This isn't working, she said, her perfect composure showing tiny fractures. We both know it. On that we agree, I replied. We're prepared to negotiate our departure, she continued. For appropriate compensation, of course. I raised an eyebrow. You want me to pay you to leave? We want fair recognition of our contributions, she corrected. A reasonable settlement to avoid any unpleasantness. What kind of unpleasantness did you have in mind? Her smile turned cold. The board meets next week. We have evidence that you've been misrepresenting the company's financial position, that your personal vendetta against us is endangering Veracity's future. Evidence? Financial projections, client communications, design archives. She shrugged elegantly. It's amazing what people leave unprotected on company servers. I nodded slowly. I see. And your proposal? 2 years' salary each, plus a percentage of future revenues from collections developed during our tenure. In exchange, we leave quietly, with positive public statements all around. That's very generous of you, I said. I'll need time to consider. Not too much time, she warned. The board meeting is Tuesday. After she left, I sat in silence, staring at the small garden visible from my office window. Verity had planted it herself, choosing each flower for its resilience rather than its beauty. Blossoms that could withstand frost and drought, that returned year after year despite adversity. The weekend passed in a blur of preparation. I barely slept, working through the night to ensure everything was ready. By Monday evening, dark circles shadowed my eyes, but a strange calm had settled over me. Tuesday morning arrived bright and clear. I dressed carefully in a suit I'd designed myself, severe in cut but with unexpected details visible only up close. Around my neck, I wore the pendant I'd made on my first day at Veracity, the silver seed breaking open. The board members arrived one by one, nodding politely but avoiding direct eye contact. The trio entered last, Madeline carrying a portfolio that presumably contained their evidence. They seated themselves opposite me, their confidence palpable. "Thank you all for coming," I began. "Before we address the agenda, I'd like to make an announcement." The room quieted. Yesterday, I finalized an agreement with the International Guild of Fine Jewelry Designers. They've selected Veracity to showcase our archives and current collections at their annual exhibition next month. Murmurs of surprise rippled through the room. The exhibition was by invitation only, a prestigious honor typically reserved for established houses with decades of history. Additionally, I continued, 3 of our newest pieces have been nominated for innovation awards. One board member leaned forward. "That's extraordinary. Congratulations." Madeline's smile tightened. "While accolades are wonderful, we have more pressing matters to discuss today." She opened her portfolio. Specifically, concerns about the company's current leadership and direction. For the next 20 minutes, she presented their case, charts showing projected losses based on my new direction, emails taken out of context to suggest I was alienating key partners, design sketches they claimed showed a creative decline. When she finished, the room was silent. Board members glanced at each other, unsure how to proceed. "Thank you, Madeline," I said. "That was very thorough." I turned to the board. "Now, if you'll permit me, I'd like to offer a different perspective." I opened my laptop and connected it to the room's display system. On the screen appeared a simple graph, client retention rates over the past 2 years. When I left Veracity 7 months ago, client retention had dropped to an all-time low. I explained. Longtime customers were leaving, despite the trio's claims of increased profits. I clicked to the next slide. Detailed financial projections showing sustainable growth based on returning clients and new commissions. Short-term profit spikes are easy to achieve by cutting quality and raising prices. Sustainable growth requires client loyalty and word-of-mouth recommendations. For the next hour, I methodically dismantled their case, presenting evidence of how their leadership had damaged Veracity's reputation, alienated core clients, and compromised the quality that had been our hallmark. The board members' expressions shifted from skepticism to concern to outright alarm. "But this isn't just about numbers," I said, reaching the end of my presentation. "It's about integrity. About honoring Verity's vision." I paused, looking directly at the trio, "and about honesty in how we conduct ourselves." I clicked to one final slide. These are files that were downloaded from my computer 3 days ago. Design archives, client lists, supplier contracts, everything needed to start a competing jewelry design company. Griffin's face flushed. "That's absurd. Where's your proof?" "The files were watermarked," I said quietly, "each with a unique digital signature that activates when copied. Standard practice for protecting intellectual property." Adeline laughed nervously. "This is ridiculous. A desperate attempt to... Matt..." "To what?" I interrupted. "To protect the company Verity built? To prevent you from stealing what isn't yours? Again?" The room fell silent. "I don't want your resignations," I said, looking at each of them in turn. "I don't want settlements or legal battles or public scandals." "What do you want?" Madeline asked, her voice barely audible. I smiled. "I want you to stay." Confusion rippled through the room. The board members exchanged bewildered glances while the trio stared at me with naked suspicion. "You want us to stay?" Griffin repeated, his voice thick with disbelief. "Absolutely," I said, closing my laptop. "With a few adjustments to your current roles, of course." I turned to address the board. Verity believed in second chances, in learning from mistakes rather than simply punishing them. I'd like to honor that philosophy. Madeline's perfectly manicured nails drummed silently against the table, her eyes calculating. "What exactly did you have in mind?" "Transparency," I replied. "Complete transparency." Over the next hour, I outlined my proposal. Madeline, Adeline, and Griffin would remain at Veracity, but under a new arrangement. They would work directly with our artisans, learning the fundamentals of jewelry creation from the ground up. Their communication with clients and suppliers would be supervised. Their access to financial and design systems would be restricted. This is insulting, Adeline finally erupted. We're industry veterans, not apprentices. You're industry veterans who attempted to steal company property, I corrected. Who systematically sabotaged a colleague until she resigned. Who lied to a dying woman about her protégé. The room grew very still. Your choice is simple, I continued. Accept these terms, or face legal consequences for attempted theft of intellectual property. The board can decide which option better serves Veracity's interests. The vote was unanimous. The trio would stay, under my terms. As the meeting concluded, the board members filed out quickly, avoiding eye contact with their former allies. Madeline lingered, her composure cracking just enough to reveal the rage beneath. You won't get away with this, she hissed. People like you don't win against people like us. I studied her face, the perfect makeup, the practiced expressions, the carefully calculated intensity in her eyes. That's where you're wrong, I said quietly. People like me have already won. You just haven't realized it yet. The months that followed were a masterclass in controlled humiliation. Madeline, Adeline, and Griffin arrived each morning to find themselves assigned basic tasks that even our newest apprentices had mastered. They polished metals until their fingers cramped. They sorted gemstones by size and clarity. They learned to recognize the difference between work that was merely technically proficient and work that carried genuine emotion. They hated every minute of it. This is a waste of my expertise, Griffin complained during his third week of basic metalwork training. Pierre, who had become my most trusted ally, regarded him with cool detachment. You claim expertise in jewelry, yet you cannot properly anneal silver without scorching it. Perhaps the waste is in your claims, not your assignment. They tried everything to escape their situation. Madeline attempted to rally the board for another vote of no confidence, only to discover that the evidence of their attempted theft had thoroughly eroded any remaining support. Adeline reached out to former clients, hoping to lure them away, only to find that those relationships had been permanently damaged during their tenure. Griffin explored legal options, but every attorney he consulted confirmed what Bartholomew had explained. They had signed contracts that allowed for reassignment of duties, and their attempted theft had given me legitimate cause for restricting their access. Throughout it all, I continued designing. The creative spark that had been nearly extinguished during my exile roared back to life. Each piece I created felt more honest, more deeply connected to its intended purpose than anything I'd made before. The international press took notice. Features in prestigious magazines described Veracity's renaissance under my leadership. Orders poured in faster than we could fulfill them. And still, the trio stayed. Pride prevented them from resigning. Greed kept them attached to their substantial salaries. Spite made them determined to outlast me, to find some way to reclaim control. 6 months after the board meeting, I received a call from the International Guild of Fine Jewelry Designers. 3 of my pieces had won their respective categories at the annual exhibition. The Guild was hosting a gala to celebrate the winners, with industry leaders and press from around the world in attendance. Congratulations, Madeline said when she heard the news, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. Quite an achievement. I studied her face, noting the new lines of strain around her mouth. Thank you. I'd like all 3 of you to attend. Their surprise was evident. You want us there? Adeline asked suspiciously. Of course, I replied. You're still senior partners after all. It would look strange if you weren't present for such an important company event. The night of the gala arrived. The trio appeared in designer formal wear, clearly intending to present themselves as key figures in Veracity's success. I greeted them cordially, introducing them to guild officials and industry journalists as valuable members of our production team. Each time, their smiles grew more strained. As dinner concluded, the guild president approached our table. Miss Wesley, we'd like to present your awards now. Would you and your team join me on stage? I nodded, turning to Pierre and 2 other master artisans who had helped refine my winning designs. Shall we? Madeline cleared her throat. Shouldn't we join you as well, as senior partners? The guild president looked confused. I was under the impression these were your primary collaborators, he said, gesturing to Pierre and the others. They absolutely are, I confirmed. Madeline, Adeline, and Griffin handle more administrative aspects of production. The humiliation was subtle but complete. They remained at the table, watching as I accepted the awards alongside the artisans who had truly contributed to the design's success. Later that evening, as guests mingled during the reception, I overheard a conversation between Griffin and the creative director of a rival jewelry house. "Must be challenging," the director was saying, "working under someone you once supervised." Griffin's response was tight. "Temporary arrangement, market conditions, you understand." "Of course," the director nodded, clearly not believing him. "Though I must say, Wesley's work is extraordinary. That pendant with the interlocking elements, revolutionary approach to movement and light." As I moved through the crowd, similar conversations echoed around me. The trio's reputation was transforming before my eyes, from respected industry veterans to ambiguous background figures in Veracity's resurgence. The following Monday, they requested a meeting. "This isn't working," Madeline stated flatly, no longer bothering with her perfect smile. "The arrangement is unsustainable." "I'm listening," I said. "We want out," Griffin said bluntly. "Clean break. No non-compete clauses." I considered them carefully. "You understand that without non-compete agreements, you forfeit any severance beyond your final month's salary." "We understand," Adeline replied tersely. "Then I accept your resignations, effective immediately." They left that afternoon, clearing their desks under Pierre's watchful eye. No goodbyes, no well wishes, just the quiet closing of the glass doors behind them. 1 week later, industry news reported their new venture, Triad Luxury Jewelry, backed by significant investor funding. Their launch collection was scheduled to debut in 3 months at an exclusive preview event. "Aren't you concerned?" Bartholomew asked during our monthly legal review. "They have connections, resources. They could become serious competitors." I smiled. "I'm counting on it." The day of Triad's launch arrived. Their preview event was held at an upscale hotel ballroom, with carefully curated guest lists and strict security. Through a colleague who had been invited, I received photographs of their collection. The designs were technically impressive, complex, elaborate, visually striking. They showcased expensive materials and intricate techniques. On paper, they should have been spectacular, but something was missing. 2 days later, the first reviews appeared. Critics praised the technical execution but noted a strange disconnect. The pieces didn't move naturally with the body. They photographed beautifully but felt awkward when worn. They impressed at first glance but didn't invite deeper connection. "They never understood," Pierre observed as we reviewed the coverage. "Jewelry isn't just about what you see. It's about what you feel when you wear it." Over the following months, Triad's trajectory became clear. Their initial splash attracted attention and investment, but client retention proved elusive. People bought their pieces as status symbols but didn't develop the emotional connection that turned first-time buyers into loyal clients. Meanwhile, Veracity continued to thrive. We expanded thoughtfully, adding new artisans trained in our philosophy of honoring the wearer. We opened a second location focused on teaching jewelry design to young artists from underprivileged backgrounds. We launched a collection specifically designed for clients with physical disabilities, creating pieces that worked with their bodies rather than despite them. 1 year after the trio's departure, I received an invitation to speak at the National Design Conference. My topic, authenticity as competitive advantage. As I stood at the podium, looking out over hundreds of industry professionals, I spotted them in the audience, Madeline, Adeline, and Griffin, seated together near the back. Their company was struggling, industry gossip suggested. Investors were growing impatient. Expenses outpaced revenues. "True design isn't about decoration," I began. "It's about understanding, about empathy, about creating something that becomes part of someone's identity rather than merely an accessory to it." I spoke for 45 minutes about Veracity's philosophy, about Verity's legacy, about the difference between jewelry that impresses and jewelry that connects. Throughout, the trio watched with expressions that shifted between disdain and reluctant recognition. As the audience applauded at my conclusion, I made eye contact with Madeline. For just a moment, I saw something unexpected in her gaze. Not hatred or anger, but a flicker of genuine regret. That night, back in my hotel room, I finally opened the envelope I'd been carrying for months. Inside was Verity's last letter to me, delivered by Bartholomew after her will had been executed. "Rhiannon," it began, "if you're reading this, then you've reclaimed what was always yours. What I never should have allowed to be taken." Her handwriting was shaky but determined. "I knew what they were doing to you. Not at first. The treatments clouded my mind, and they were careful around me. But Pierre saw. He told me everything. By then, you were gone, and I was too weak to fix it directly." My throat tightened as I continued reading. "So, I made a different plan. I left you Veracity, not as compensation for what you suffered, but because it was always meant to be yours. You understand what I built it for. Not profit or prestige, but connection. The ability to translate human experience into something tangible." Tears blurred my vision. "Don't waste your life on revenge, dear one. It's too precious for that. Instead, build something they could never understand. A legacy of work that matters, that touches lives, that remains when we are gone. They will destroy themselves without your help. People who create nothing of true value always do." I folded the letter carefully and returned it to the envelope. In that moment, I finally understood. My revenge wasn't in humiliating them at board meetings or relegating them to basic tasks or even watching their new venture struggle. It wasn't in anything I had done to them at all. My revenge was in surviving them, in thriving despite them, in creating work of genuine value while they chased hollow prestige. They had tried to destroy me because they couldn't understand me. They had seen my approach to design as naive, my connection to clients as inefficient, my commitment to quality as impractical. They had tried to replace something authentic with something that merely looked impressive, and they had failed. 3 years after that terrible day when I'd walked out of Veracity with my belongings in a cardboard box, I stood in our expanded workshop, watching 20 artisans transform raw materials into pieces that would become part of their wearers' life stories. Our waiting list stretched 6 months. Our client retention rate exceeded 90%. Our pieces weren't just worn. They were treasured, passed down, woven into family narratives. Meanwhile, Triad Luxury Jewelry filed for bankruptcy protection. Their investors pulled out. Their elaborate showroom closed. Their technically impressive but emotionally empty pieces were liquidated at industry auctions. The ultimate revenge wasn't in destroying them. It was in building something they could never replicate, something authentic, connected, and genuinely valuable, something that would outlast all of us. The last I heard, Madeline had taken a teaching position at a design school, perhaps finally understanding that technique without heart is ultimately empty. Adeline had joined a large commercial jewelry manufacturer, applying her knowledge of trends to mass-produced pieces. Griffin had left the industry entirely. And me? I continued creating. Not for revenge or validation or even success, but because it was the language my soul spoke most fluently. Each piece that left our workshop carried a small part of my story, of falling and rising, of breaking and mending, of loss and reclamation. The most powerful revenge, I discovered, wasn't in making others suffer. It was in refusing to let their actions define my story. It was in transforming pain into beauty, humiliation into strength, endings into beginnings. It was in understanding what they never could, that true value lies not in how something looks, but in how it connects. Not in its price, but in its meaning. Not in its ability to impress, but in its capacity to matter. If you've ever been pushed aside, underestimated, or forced out of something you built, I hope this story reminds you that other people's actions don't define your worth. The most powerful response to those who try to diminish you isn't hatred, it's excellence. What revenge stories have inspired you? Share in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories of resilience and transformation. Remember, sometimes the best way to prove someone wrong is simply to succeed in ways they never imagined possible. I stood in front of Petra's glass desk, my phone still hot in my palm from the call that had just shattered my world. My sister died an hour ago. I managed to say, my voice barely audible, I need 5 days to go home for the funeral and be with my family. Petra didn't look up from her computer. The clicking of her keyboard continued for 10 more seconds before she finally raised her eyes. The merger presentation is Monday. The board meeting is Wednesday. The investor tour is Friday. She listed each item as if reading ingredients on a package. We can't afford personal tragedy time off right now, Eloin. The acquisition is too important. She returned to typing, then added without looking up, "Take the weekend. Be back Monday morning." I felt something crack inside me. Not my heart, but something harder, something foundational. I nodded mechanically and walked out. What she didn't know as I returned to my desk was that her company's most valuable asset, the distribution algorithm that had cut operational costs by 40%, had been entirely my creation. My name appeared nowhere in the documentation, but my fingerprints were on every line of code. Linnea's last words to me had been, "Stop hiding, Ellie. The world needs what you can do." I was done hiding. Before I continue with what happened next, I want to thank you for clicking on this video. What you're about to hear isn't just a story of workplace injustice. It's about recognizing your worth when others refuse to see it. If you've ever had your contributions overlooked or your humanity dismissed as inconvenient, this one's for you. Stay until the end because the moment Petra showed up trembling at my door 2 weeks later is just the beginning of what happens when quiet competence finally speaks up. And if you're enjoying our true stories, please hit like and subscribe. We post new content every week, and your support helps us reach others who need to hear these experiences. My name is Eloin Darby, and until 2 months ago, I was the invisible engine behind one of the fastest-growing logistics companies in the Midwest. I'm not naturally confrontational. I was raised to believe that good work speaks for itself. My sister Linnea was the opposite, bold, outspoken, and fiercely protective of me. We lost our parents young, and she stepped into their role without hesitation, working extra jobs to put me through college. While I pursued computer science, Linnea battled an autoimmune condition that worsened over the years. Still, she pushed me to aim higher, to demand recognition for my work. I promised her I would, someday, but then I landed at a company where my quiet nature was mistaken for weakness, and where my boss Petra built her reputation by harvesting the innovations of employees like me. I'd spent a year perfecting a distribution algorithm that revolutionized how the company operated. It predicted supply chain disruptions, optimized routing, and slashed costs dramatically. When I presented it to Petra privately, she immediately saw its potential, not for the company, but for her career. She repackaged my work, presented it to the board as her brainchild, and was hailed as a visionary. I said nothing, focusing instead on refining the system, while Petra collected accolades. Why didn't I speak up? Partly habit, partly calculation. I was documenting everything, building my case carefully, and, truthfully, I was distracted by Linnea's worsening condition. We spoke daily, and I channeled my frustration into caring for her, promising that soon I'd step into the light as she had always encouraged. But time ran out. Linnea's condition deteriorated rapidly, and I received the call on a Tuesday morning. By the time I reached Petra's office, my sister was gone. After Petra denied my bereavement leave, I didn't rage or quit. I returned to my desk, opened my laptop, and made 3 decisions. First, I would attend my sister's funeral, using sick days without explanation. Second, I would no longer contribute any innovations without proper attribution. And third, I would ensure that Petra would understand exactly what she had dismissed when she reduced my sister's death to an inconvenience. The funeral was small but beautiful. Linnea had planned much of it herself, including a letter she'd written to be read aloud. To those who diminish you, she had written, "Offer neither anger nor forgiveness. Offer consequences." I returned to work on Monday as instructed, outwardly unchanged. Petra didn't ask about my weekend or mention my loss. The merger presentation went flawlessly. I made sure of it, correcting errors in Petra's slides after hours. The board meeting brought enthusiastic approval for our growth strategy. The investor tour generated excitement. Petra took credit for all of it, as expected. What she didn't notice was that I had begun having coffee with department heads, explaining the intricacies of the distribution system that they relied on but didn't fully understand. I wasn't complaining about lack of credit. I was simply ensuring that everyone knew exactly how the system worked and who had built it. I documented every meeting meticulously. Fascinating, said our operations director after I walked him through the algorithm. I had no idea you developed this entire system. Petra always presents it as a team effort that she directs. I smiled. Knowledge transfer is important for company resilience. If anything happened to me, the company would need to understand how everything works. By the end of the week, I had quietly educated every key person in the company about my role. Not accusatory, not bitter, just factual. I also reached out to 3 industry contacts who had expressed interest in our distribution methods at the last trade show. We scheduled coffee meetings for the following week. Meanwhile, the acquisition that Petra prioritized over my bereavement was showing signs of trouble. The potential buyers were impressed by our efficiency metrics, but had concerns about sustainability. They wanted to meet with the innovation team behind the distribution system, the system that Petra had claimed as her own creation. They're sending their technical team on Thursday. Petra announced in the Monday morning meeting. I need everyone prepared to demonstrate how our system works. Her eyes slid past me as if I were wallpaper. Will you be leading the technical presentation? Asked our marketing director. Of course, Petra replied. It's my system. I said nothing, but typed a quick email under the table to our board chair, requesting a private meeting that afternoon. His response came immediately. My office, 4 p.m. That meeting lasted exactly 27 minutes. I brought documentation of my work, testimonials from department heads, and a demonstration of system elements that only its creator would know. I explained that I wasn't looking to create drama. I simply wanted the upcoming acquisition meetings to proceed with transparency. The chair's expression changed from confusion to concern to calculation as I spoke. Why are you bringing this to me now? He asked finally. My sister died 2 weeks ago, I said simply. Her last wish was for me to stop hiding my light. I promised her I would. He nodded slowly. I'm sorry for your loss, and I apologize on behalf of the company if we failed to acknowledge it properly. Thank you. As for next steps, I'm not asking for Petra to be punished. I'm asking for the opportunity to represent my own work to the acquisition team, and for proper attribution going forward. He studied me for a long moment. Let me discuss this with the other board members. I'll be in touch tomorrow. I thanked him and left, uncertain what would follow but feeling Linnea's presence like a hand on my shoulder. The next day passed without word from the board. I continued my work, finalizing preparations for the acquisition team's visit. Petra seemed increasingly tense, checking her phone constantly and disappearing for long stretches. I later learned she'd been called into multiple emergency board meetings. On Wednesday morning, I arrived to find an email requesting my presence in the conference room at 9 a.m. When I entered, the entire board was seated along with our legal counsel. Petra was not present. Alone, the chair began. We've spent the past day verifying the information you shared. We've also reviewed communications and presentations from the past year. I nodded, waiting. What we found is deeply concerning. Not only has your work been systematically misattributed, but the acquisition team specifically requested to meet the algorithm's creator after their technical team reviewed our documentation. They identified discrepancies that suggested the person presenting the system wasn't the person who built it. I kept my expression neutral despite the vindication flooding through me. We're making immediate changes to our leadership structure, he continued. We've placed Petra on administrative leave pending a full investigation, and we're creating a new position, Chief Innovation Officer, which we'd like to offer to you. I felt a moment of vertigo, as if the ground had shifted beneath me. Thank you, I said carefully. I appreciate your thoroughness. Before I accept, I'd like to propose a company policy change as part of my conditions. Go on, he said. I'd like to implement a minimum 3-week bereavement leave policy for immediate family members, with no questions asked. Some things are more important than business, and our company should reflect that value. The board members exchanged glances, then the chair nodded. Consider it done. Is there anything else? Yes, I said. I'd like to be the one to inform Petra of these changes. 2 hours later, I was sitting in what had been my small office when the door opened. Petra stood there, her face drained of color, hands visibly trembling. "I need your help," she whispered, voice barely audible. "The investors are threatening to pull out tomorrow unless someone can convince them otherwise. The board said you're the only one who can save the acquisition." I looked at her calmly, saying nothing. "Please," she continued, a note of desperation creeping in. "Whatever issues we've had, this is about the company's survival. Everyone's jobs are at stake." I leaned forward slightly. "Including yours?" Her eyes widened as understanding dawned. "You knew. You've known all along what was happening. That you took credit for my work? Yes. That you built your reputation on the innovations of others? Absolutely. That you denied me the chance to say goodbye to my sister properly because an acquisition meeting was more important? That part I'll never forget." Petra swallowed hard. "I can explain." "There's no need," I interrupted gently. "The board has already made their decision." I stood and walked around my desk, handing her a document. "This isn't a termination notice. It's a reassignment. You're being moved to project support. You'll be working under the new Chief Innovation Officer." Her hands shook as she took the paper. "And who would that be?" "Me," I said simply. The color drained further from her face. "You can't do this. I built this department." "No, Petra. You didn't build anything. You took credit for what others built. And now everyone knows it." She stared at me, recognition finally dawning. "This isn't about the work at all, is it? This is about your sister." "This is about consequences," I corrected her. "My sister taught me that some lessons can only be learned through experience. You're about to learn what it feels like when someone else controls your future and dismisses what matters to you." I gestured to the chair across from my desk. "Now, let's discuss how you're going to support me in tomorrow's acquisition meeting. After all, we can't afford any personal tragedies right now. The acquisition is too important." Petra sank into the chair, the paper trembling in her hands. "You've been planning this," she whispered, not a question, but a realization. "No," I corrected her. "I've been doing my job exceptionally well while documenting everything. The planning only started when you showed me exactly who you were 2 weeks ago." Her eyes narrowed slightly. "So, this is revenge." I leaned back in my chair and considered her. Is it revenge to want credit for your work? Is it revenge to expect basic human decency when facing a personal tragedy? Or is it simply balance? I opened my laptop and turned it to face her. On the screen was tomorrow's presentation for the acquisition team. "Your name isn't anywhere on this," she noted, scrolling through. "Neither was mine on any of the presentations you gave using my work," I replied calmly. "The difference is, I'm giving you a chance to contribute. Your institutional knowledge is valuable, Petra. I'm not erasing you, I'm repositioning you." Something shifted in her expression, a flash of comprehension, followed by calculation. I recognized it immediately. Petra was looking for leverage, for a way to turn this situation to her advantage. "The acquisition team respects me," she said, straightening slightly. "They've been dealing with me for months. If I suddenly disappear, or appear demoted, they'll get nervous." "You're right," I acknowledged. "That's why you'll be introducing me tomorrow as the creator of the distribution system and expressing how proud you are of nurturing talent. You'll explain that our restructuring reflects our commitment to innovation leadership." Her laugh was brittle. "And why would I do that?" I closed my laptop gently. "Because the alternative is the board releasing their findings about systematic credit misappropriation. Because 3 potential employers have already contacted me about bringing my distribution system to them, and I've declined out of loyalty to this company. Because deep down, you know this outcome is more merciful than what you deserve." Petra stared at me, trying to gauge how much of this was bluff. I held her gaze steadily until she looked away. "What do you need me to do?" she asked finally, defeat edging into her voice. I pulled out a folder. "Here's the script for tomorrow. Review it tonight. We'll meet at 7 a.m. to rehearse. One more thing." I opened my drawer and placed a small silver frame on my desk. Inside was a photo of Linnea laughing on a beach from our last vacation together. This stays on my desk during every meeting as a reminder of what matters. Petra glanced at the photo, then quickly away. "Is that her?" Your sister? Yes, her name was Linnea. She was 34. A flicker of something, perhaps genuine remorse, crossed Petra's face. I'm sorry about your sister. Thank you, I said, my voice softening slightly. That's the first time you've acknowledged her death. The silence stretched between us, heavy with unspoken recriminations and missed opportunities for basic humanity. Tomorrow, 7 a.m., I finally said. Don't be late. After Petra left, I sat alone in my office, running my fingers over Linnea's photograph. I did it. I whispered to her image. Not how you would have been much louder, but I did it. I could almost hear her laugh, feel her hand squeezing my shoulder. That's my quiet hurricane sister. The acquisition meeting the next morning went precisely as planned. Petra performed her role flawlessly, introducing me as the brilliant mind behind our revolutionary distribution system. If the acquisition team noticed the tension beneath her polished presentation, they didn't show it. When it was my turn to speak, I demonstrated aspects of the algorithm that only its creator could explain. The technical team leaned forward in their chairs, their questions becoming increasingly enthusiastic. By the end of the presentation, the lead investor was discussing implementation timelines rather than whether to proceed. I'm curious, their CTO asked during a break. Why haven't we met you before now, Elowen? Before I could answer, Petra stepped in smoothly. That's on me. I've been too focused on presenting results without properly highlighting the team behind them. It's something our company is actively correcting with our recent restructuring. I caught her eye briefly. It was a good answer, perhaps the first genuinely collaborative moment between us. The acquisition was approved by the end of the day. As the investors left, the board chair pulled me aside. Extraordinary work, he said. Both the presentation and how you handled Petra. Many would have pushed for termination. Firing her wouldn't teach her anything, I replied. This way, she learns what it means to have someone else control your professional narrative. He nodded thoughtfully. Your sister would be proud. I felt my chest tighten. You didn't know her. No, he agreed. But I know what it means to lose someone. My wife, 3 years ago. Cancer. The simple admission caught me off guard. I'm sorry. The 3-week bereavement policy you proposed? I'm expanding it to 4 weeks, with an option for reduced hours during the transition back. The board approved it unanimously this morning. Tears pricked at my eyes unexpectedly. Thank you. No, thank you. For reminding us that companies are made of people, not just productivity metrics. That evening, I stayed late, sitting in my new office, Petra's former space, which I'd already begun transforming. The floor-to-ceiling windows offered a view of the city lights emerging as dusk fell. I was reviewing department budgets when a knock came at my door. Petra stood there, looking smaller somehow without her usual commanding presence. Do you have a minute? I gestured to the chair opposite my desk. Of course. She sat, placing a sleek leather portfolio on the desk between us. This contains all the client contacts and relationship notes I've maintained over the years. Some of it isn't in the company system. She pushed it toward me. You'll need it. I opened the portfolio, surprised by the meticulously organized contents. This is comprehensive. I built those relationships over a decade, she said quietly. Whatever else you think of me, I did that part well. I nodded, acknowledging the truth in her words. Why are you giving me this? Petra looked down at her hands. I received a job offer today, a lateral move to a smaller company. Less prestige, but a fresh start. You're resigning? I hadn't expected this. Yes, but I wanted to do this properly. A clean handoff. I studied her face, searching for the manipulation I'd grown accustomed to seeing. Instead, I found something like resignation mixed with relief. What changed? I asked. She was quiet for so long, I thought she might not answer. My mother called this afternoon, she finally said. My father had a stroke. Minor, but a warning sign. I told her I couldn't come right away because we were finishing the acquisition. Petra's voice faltered slightly. She said she understood. That's when I realized I'd trained everyone in my life to expect absence when they needed presence. The irony wasn't lost on either of us. Take the time you need with your family, I said. The new bereavement policy includes family medical emergencies. A bitter smile touched her lips. I don't work here anymore, remember? Your resignation hasn't been processed. As far as HR is concerned, you're still employed for the next 2 weeks. Use the time. Petra looked at me with genuine confusion. Why would you do that for me? After everything? I thought about Linnea, about what she would say in this moment, because breaking a cycle of cruelty requires someone to make a different choice. It might as well be me. She nodded slowly, then stood to leave. At the door, she paused. For what it's worth, I was wrong about you, Elowen. I thought your quietness was weakness. It's not. No, I agreed. It never was. After she left, I called Linnea's partner, Dante. I've been thinking about Linnea's foundation idea, I said when he answered. The one for supporting families during medical crises. Her dream project? Dante replied, his voice warming at the memory. She talked about it constantly those last few months. I want to fund it. Not just a donation, I want to establish it properly, with dedicated staff. The silence on the other end stretched until I heard what might have been a muffled sob. She would have been ecstatic, he finally managed. I know, and I think I know exactly how to structure it. Over the next month, as I settled into my new role, I developed a dual focus. At work, I built a true innovation team, ensuring every member received proper credit for their contributions. I instituted transparent attribution practices that became a selling point for recruiting top talent. Simultaneously, I established the Linnea Foundation, designed to provide financial and logistical support to families facing medical crises. The Foundation's first initiative, partnering with companies to implement comprehensive bereavement and family emergency policies. 6 months after the acquisition, our company became the Foundation's first corporate partner, expanding our bereavement policy further and creating flexible work arrangements for employees with family health emergencies. The program became a case study in business schools for how compassionate policies improved retention and productivity. 1 year to the day after Linnea's death, I stood in our company auditorium, addressing all employees. Today we're closing our offices worldwide for our first annual Day of Compassion, I announced. Each of you will receive paid time to volunteer with organizations supporting families in health crises, or to spend with your own loved ones. This day commemorates my sister Linnea, but it also honors everyone you've lost, everyone you cherish. As I looked out at the assembled faces, I spotted Petra at the back of the room. She had returned briefly for the event at my invitation. Our eyes met, and she gave a small nod of acknowledgement. After the ceremony, she approached me. The Foundation is doing remarkable work, she said. 3 companies in my industry have adopted your policies. That's wonderful, I replied, genuinely pleased. How's your father? Recovering well. I've been working remotely 2 days a week to spend time with my parents. She smiled faintly. Something I never would have considered in my old life. And the new company? Different. Better in some ways. I'm learning to let my team shine without feeling threatened. It's humbling. We stood in comfortable silence for a moment. 2 people who had traveled a complicated path from adversary to something not quite friendship, but perhaps mutual respect. She would have liked this, Petra said, gesturing to the Day of Compassion banners. Your sister. Yes, I agreed, feeling Linnea's presence strongly, though she would have insisted on much louder music and probably dancing. Petra laughed softly. Next year, perhaps. As she turned to leave, she added, You know, I expected your revenge to be destroying my career. Instead, you somehow made me better at it. That's a unique form of justice. I watched her walk away, reflecting on the journey of the past year. When I'd stood in Petra's office that day, newly bereaved and being denied the chance to properly grieve, I couldn't have imagined where it would lead. The revenge fantasy would have been seeing Petra humiliated, fired, professionally ruined. The reality was something more profound, a transformation that rippled outward, changing policies, changing lives, changing me. I touched the small silver frame I now wore as a pendant around my neck, Linnea's laughing face visible within it. To those who diminish you, offer consequences, she had written. What she hadn't specified was that sometimes the most powerful consequence isn't destruction but reconstruction, building something so undeniably better that the old way becomes unthinkable. As I moved through the crowd of employees now preparing to depart for their volunteer assignments, I overheard snippets of conversation about which organizations they'd chosen, which family members they'd reconnect with, each person carrying forward a small piece of Linnea's legacy, most without ever knowing her name. That evening, I visited my sister's grave, placing fresh sunflowers, her favorite, against the headstone. "You always told me to stop hiding," I said softly to the quiet earth. "I thought you meant my work, my talents, but you meant my power to change things, didn't you?" The gentle breeze that rustled the flowers felt like her answer. I traced her name on the stone. "I miss you every day, but I see you everywhere now. In every policy changed, every family supported, every person who gets to say a proper goodbye." As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the cemetery, I made a silent promise to continue building on this foundation of compassion and recognition. Not just for Linnea, but for everyone who had ever stood in an office, bearing invisible pain, and been told that their humanity was an inconvenience. Some forms of justice aren't swift or dramatic. Some revolutions happen quietly, one policy change at a time, one life improved after another. My quiet revolution had only just begun. Thank you for staying with me through this story. If you've ever had your worth questioned or your humanity dismissed, I hope you found some validation in what you heard today. Remember that sometimes the most powerful response isn't an explosion but a transformation, changing systems rather than just individuals. If this resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us share more stories of justice, growth, and meaningful change. In the comments, I'd love to hear about policies or changes you've helped implement in your workplace that recognize the full humanity of employees. How have you turned personal pain into positive transformation? Your experiences might inspire others who are just beginning their own journeys toward recognition and respect. Until next time, remember that your quiet strength has power, sometimes more than you know.